According to the Bible, how many times are you supposed to forgive your brother? Hey everybody, this is Pastor Justin Walker with The Whole Truth, and we are almost there. We have almost completed the book of Genesis. We will finish it today, so grab a Bible, turn it open to Genesis chapter 50, and look at verse 15. So that's 50, verse 15. And we have seen all the way from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob has passed away. They've mourned the death of Jacob. And now it is after the mourning of the death of Jacob. And the brothers are worried. Look at this. It's Genesis chapter 50 and verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him." So they sent a messenger to Joseph saying, "Before your father died, he commanded, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him." Now, you understand that his brothers, at this point, we're talking nearly 40 years earlier, his brothers had sold him into slavery. They were actually going to kill him. Joseph was the favored son. That's not good, but that's not a reason to sell someone into slavery or try to kill someone. And that's what the brothers had done. The other 10 brothers, so from Reuben down, so Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then after Jacob you had Reuben and Simeon and Levi and all of those guys, they got upset at Joseph because he was the favorite son, and they put him in a pit and they sold him almost 40 years ago. Their father has now passed. 40 years later, we've had all of those stories in between, and Joseph ascended to power and all of that. And now Joseph, all of these years later, they're writing to him. His brothers are writing to him saying, "Now that our dad has passed away, we're concerned that you're going to repay us, that you're going to actually repay us." That maybe it was Jacob was the reason that they were taken care of for all of these years. Maybe Joseph only took care of them because Jacob was their dad and he was still alive. And now that Jacob is gone, maybe now he's going to repay them. And so they sent him this letter and said that our father said before he died. Now we have no record of Jacob actually saying this, so it seems like the brothers might have made this up and they're just trying to use their dad and their God as a way to keep Joseph from coming against them and trying to repay them. But they said, your dad, your father, asked us to write to you and say, "Please forgive your servants for their trespasses." And then they go on to say, the God of your father, the servants of the God of your father. And so they're trying to evoke some emotion out of Joseph. And I love the picture that is painted here as Joseph begins to weep. He reads what they have to say and he weeps. And look what he says in verse 19. Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for I am in the place of God. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about, as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now, therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Now, first of all, you need to understand that Joseph is offering to truly forgive and has offered and has proven, by the way, for the past 17 years that they have lived, more than 17 years now that they've lived with Joseph. Joseph has proven that he has offered to forgive them. And he is not looking back and trying to repay them. That is a worldly concept, and I want you to hear me. Unforgiveness only holds you down. Joseph has forgiven his brothers. He has moved on, so much as he moved on that when they bring it up all those years later, Joseph literally weeps. He cries. And he says, "Don't be afraid." What does Joseph need to do for you, his brothers, so that you wouldn't feel afraid? He has forgiven you. Listen to me, friends. The chain of unforgiveness will hold only you down. You will constantly fret. You'll be concerned. It'll be on your mind. But the person that you haven't forgiven, they're going to go on with their lives. Listen, forgive, because when you forgive, it lifts the burden off of you. And you can be free from that burden in the person of Christ. And that brings up my last point, which is that Joseph once again paints for us a beautiful picture of Christ. Christ who offers to forgive us. Christ has the power to punish us. I mean, if we wanted to really get down to it, Christ has the right and the power and the ability to punish each and every one of us. But he chooses to forgive us. And what he's asking us to do is to trust in that forgiveness. You know, it's Satan who is the great accuser. Satan is the enemy. The enemy is the great accuser who comes against us. He comes against our mind, and he reminds us of who we used to be, what we used to do. It is not God who holds it over your head and says, but remember when you were a teenager and you did? Or even remember last week when you did. God doesn't come against us to accuse us. God comes to us to save us. Did you see what Joseph said? He said, what you meant for evil, God meant it for good. It's why? To save many people alive. And so we can trust that Jesus is offering to forgive us because that's the reason he came. We did evil to him. Jesus came and did only good to us, and we did evil to him. Mankind did evil to him. And I don't just mean when we hung him on a cross, because we did hang him on a cross, but we also do evil to him every time that we sin. When we sin, we are sinning against him. And he is the one standing ready to forgive us. The one who has the power to punish us, who has the right to punish us, offers to forgive. That's the reason that he came. That's the reason that he died on the cross. That's the reason that he rose again. That's the reason that he copied down his word and sent preachers into the world so that men could hear that Jesus is Lord of all and offers to forgive you. That is the good news of the gospel. We don't have to be scared of him. We need to turn to him and run to him, and he will embrace us in his arms. Let's finish up Genesis right here. Genesis 22. So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the third generation, and the children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were also brought up on Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brethren, I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph spoke an oath to the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And we end with this kind of double prophecy. The prophecy certainly is that Joseph is saying to his brothers, God will visit you and he'll bring you out of this land. But did you notice that then Joseph goes on to kind of say it a second time? And why is that? Because not only did God visit the Hebrew people, and if I've confused you, let me slow down for just a second and remind you that what happens, or maybe tell you for the first time, that what happens from this point forward, we go from Genesis 50, we're going to jump into Exodus. And tomorrow we'll see a different type of a video. We're going to kind of overview all of Exodus as a whole, and then we'll get into the stories the next day as we go one at a time through those. But what happens between Genesis 50 and Exodus chapter 1 is that the people of the Hebrew people who are living in Egypt end up getting put into slavery, and they're in slavery for 400 years. And God has to send a deliverer to them. His name is Moses, and Moses will draw those people out of their slavery, and he will lead them into the promised land, or lead them toward the promised land. Well, that's the physical earthly side that will happen in the next 400 years from this story in Genesis chapter 50. But there's another side that happens. As Joseph said, God will surely visit you. And he did, in the person of Jesus. Joseph, his whole life is making this picture, foreshadowing Christ who would come. And then he ends his life by prophesying about that Jesus and says that God will surely visit you. And God did visit them. Jesus told us plainly that he came for the Jew first, that he came to the house of Israel, that this is what all of the Bible had been pointing to all of those years. What we're reading through right now is all pointing to Christ who will come, and he comes to forgive you. And I hope today that you'll take the same thing that Christ has offered you and you'll offer it to others and offer forgiveness, because when you do, it'll relieve the burden off of you. It'll break the chain from you to offer forgiveness to those who've hurt you. All right, guys, I hope that you've enjoyed the videos. I hope that you've enjoyed going through Genesis with me. And tomorrow we will start with the book of Exodus. I'll see you then. I look forward to it.